All right, back with you on the Kirby on Sports podcast, Dan Dembski, Josh Kirby. We are now joined by a very special individual. If you travel up to Baltimore Orioles games, chances are you will see the School of Rock in the press box because he writes his story almost every day. School of Rock, what's going on, buddy?
Every day.
What's up, guys? Yes, every day since August 1st, 2008. Apparently, I've got a reader, Rusty, who's kept track of the actual days of the streak. We're over 5,000.
How about
Yeah, it's a
man.
sickness, and it's got to end soon.
Every single day. I know Dan's gonna talk to you more about that, but Rock, thank you so much for hopping on for a little bit of time. MASN covering the Orioles. You can find him on Twitter at MASN Rock. Before we get into the Orioles talk, Rock, I ask pretty much any one of my guests this question: how'd you get started in the world of sports?
Yeah, I've been asked many times, like, can you speak at our journalism class? I'm like, everything I did was wrong. So for me to speak and be like, hey, don't do this. I'll try and make this a short story, but I majored in journalism at the University of Maryland for like one semester and switched to radio, TV, film, RTVF. But I took a bunch of writing classes. So I graduated. I didn't write for the Diamondback, the school paper, and I didn't have any clips other than my high school ones at Old Mill, which nobody wants to see those. I had no clue what I was going to do when I got out. I interviewed at like a radio station, a TV station. They were like, oh, you probably should be in a newspaper because you write. I took all these writing courses, but I didn't have the clips. And then it just became a series of lucky breaks where a girlfriend, her neighbor across the street used to get the penny saver. I don't even know if you guys know what the penny saver is.
Yeah.
And they were advertising. The owners were starting a free weekly in the greater Suburban Park Arnold area. They were looking for a sports writer. So I would have known that if she didn't tell me. I didn't read the penny saver. I applied, and the girl who was on the news side, it was like one person I went to high school with. We were friends. She was my editor of the school paper my junior year, her senior year. And she's like, oh, he's funny. He's hilarious. Go ahead and hire him. And the woman who was in charge from Severna Park was like really involved in the Severna Park community. And she knew my dad. He was a principal at Severna Park Middle School and had a real crush on him. Said, oh, I used to love going to his office. So she already knew the name. That's how I got in. So I'm there for a year. The paper folds. I'm covering preps. There's like 16 schools in Anne Arundel County, plus Anne Arundel community, private schools there. And they fold after a year. And a girl I had been dating, who I ended up marrying, we had a daughter, divorced later, all that information. But she went to the Sun and said, hey, they have an opening for a sports clerk in the Anne Arundel County Bureau. I wouldn't have known that. I applied. The editor goes, really? You are an editor at your paper. You want to come here and be a clerk? I'm like, dude, I'm out of a job. And I was an editor because I was the only one in the department. Let's go on a resume. So I got the job, and I really had to pay my dues. I eventually became a reporter, covered high schools in the county, ended up covering small colleges, and just worked my way to getting on the Oriole beat. And that only happened, I helped out, 95 Ripken streak ending, or just streak breaking the record. I mean, not 21-30, 21-31, covered the playoffs in 96, the Jeffrey Mayer game at Yankee Stadium, just helping out. And in the spring of 97, the two Oriole writers put in their 2 weeks notice. Buster Olney went to the New York Times to cover the Yankees. Jason Lacunfora went to Detroit to cover the Red Wings, the big hockey guy. And I got called in the editor's office, hey, can you go down to Lauderdale and cover the Orioles? And they hired Joe Strauss, the late, great Joe Strauss from Atlanta, to be the lead guy. I was the backup. I met him during the workout at Camden Yards before opening day. But that happened because two guys left. So it was a series of breaks that I would never go to a class and say, look, here's what you do. Don't get an internship, because I didn't. Hope a girlfriend's neighbor sees a job opening. Hope you have connections, etc. Date a girl who will get you a job somewhere else. It just all happened. And then luckily, I guess fortunately, I was considered good enough at the job to advance. But man, it took a lot of breaks to make that happen. That was my short answer. Would you like the longer answer?
That's perfect. That's perfect. So it sounds like connections have always been important. I'll write that down. That's good. That's good to know. But talent definitely comes into it as well. Now, when you got to MASN in 2008, did you set a goal for yourself to write a blog every day? Or what was the process like at the beginning to get you on the road to where you are now? 15 years later, well, not quite 15 years because it's, we're 7 months away, but 14 and a half years later, to get where you are today? Did you know that you would be writing a blog every day, or did it just kind of pour out of you in that respect?
It just happened. And part of the motivation was the competition, because I was at the Sun. This is another break. The Sun was offering one of its series of buyouts. And I had no intention at that point of really thinking I was going to take it, but a lot of good people had left. I mean, 2 guys were fired while we were in the press box at an Oriole game. They got a phone call, and it was David Steele, Rick Mace got the call, like, hey, can you come up to 501 North Calvert Street? It's like, seriously? That, like, this was happening. So I had sat down before a road trip to Boston with somebody at MASN, met up with them and just said, hey, I just checking to see if you have any openings. I'm just kind of seeing, just in case I need to find something else. And they said they really didn't at the time. And I said, well, by the time I get back from my road trip, that buyout deadline is going to pass, but just keep me in mind. And I just happened to be helping with the post-game show at the radio station after a game. So I was at Steve Bolesky, and I was like, going on midnight, my phone is blowing up from the guy I sat down with that day. So during a commercial break, I took the call, and he said, hey, I just happened to be in DC. I may have been John Angelos that was there. And I just mentioned our talk, and he said, hey, get a deal done tonight. So basically, I had to make the decision on the spot, like, we need to know right now. I'm like, I've been at the Sun over 20 years. How do you make that decision? Right. And then they told me the salary, and it was like, all right, let's do this. Like twice what I was making at the Sun. Not because I'm getting paid a lot. I was just so grossly underpaid at the Sun newspaper salary. So I was like, and I talked to my parents later, like, you made the right call. But I went from having, the union and feeling like there was some security, even with all the layoffs, to go into a place I had a 1-year contract with an option. If they don't pick up that option, they're not happy. I'm one and done. So it was scary. But then the news, this is another long story. I'm sorry. The news.
Oh, you're fine. Please, go ahead.
I was going to wait to tell my bosses. I just put in I submitted my papers. I didn't want to tell them I had another job lined up because they may not give me the buyout then. So they were like, oh, you have something at MASN? And I was like, nah, I'm just, at this point, I'm just looking to, and I hadn't signed anything yet anyway, but I'm just looking around, spend more time with my daughter, single dad, whatever. And I just happened to mention it to Dave Tremblay before a game, said, hey, when you get back from your trip, I'm probably going to be at MASN instead of the Baltimore Sun. Just give me a heads up between us. He was not a fan of MASN at that time for whatever reason. So that was the Sunday where they finally won a Sunday game for the first time in forever. And he walked into the interview room with a cigar, whatever. And at one point he goes, Roch, sorry to hear you're leaving the Sun, but I'm glad you're going to MASN. And I looked at my friend next to me. I said, I think I just got outed on live TV. Sure enough, the next morning my boss called. So you do have another. And I was like, I have not signed anything. So they let me stay like for the last 2 weeks, but I couldn't write the blog any longer, which was Roch Around the Clock. I got locked out of it, and they launched Peter Schmuck's The Schmuck Stops Here blog, clearly to counter me. I couldn't say where I was going, basically hoping that it would fail terribly. Nobody would follow me. They wouldn't know where I was.
Right.
So I think part of it, me, all of a sudden, it was supposed to just be me. They just wanted me to bring my humorous little thing I was doing at the Sun over to MASN. And I'm thinking I don't have to do the beat work anymore. This is great. But then it became a competitive thing. Break some stories. You get on MLB trade rumors. Make sure you got your following. I wanted to beat Schmuck. And I just kind of created the monster that now I really wish I had gone back to just writing a few times a week and not having all that pressure. So I think it evolved because I was a little insecure about going somewhere new. I thought it was called MASN.com. I'd never heard of it. It was MASN Sports. I didn't really follow. I didn't even know MASN had a website, really. And competing with the Sun and trying to, shove it up there, what's a little bit here and there. So I think that's what happened. Then it just became a thing where I would just file every day. And then all of a sudden I had some people, tracking it like, wow, you haven't had a day off yet. And I'd hear from accounting once a year at MASN, like, hey, we need you to take some vacation here. And I'm like, I will, don't worry. And I did. Now I think, I'll break news with you guys. That streak's ending in 2023. I'm getting a new contract.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like it's to the point where I need to, for, my mental health and whatever else, to take, to back it down a little bit. I'm still going to cover the team and whatever, but there's a lot of pressure to have something every day, especially when nothing's going on. one of my bosses said, Roch, we were sure at some point you were going to end the streak. When you wrote on the day your dad died, we realized he's never going to end the streak. So I'm like, all right, which tomorrow is 4-year anniversary of that. So it's probably time. Like I went on my honeymoon. I had stories ready to launch. It's probably time for me to back it off a little bit. But so it really, by accident, it became a streak.
Wow. So you mentioned the pressure. Have you ever had like really bad writer's block, and how did you overcome that? Because you have to put out something. Well, now you do. Well, since the streak started, you've had to put something out every day.
I mean, there are days that are tougher than others, especially the off season.
Right.
Really, when they're like those dead zones where it's like, and that's you try and get a little creative. You do a mailbag, some upcoming storylines. But I did one time have maybe one of the worst hangovers in history on New Year's Day, and the streak was going still. I was at a friend's. I got really sick, and I just spent the night at his house. The next morning, I'm literally scraping my windshield with my forehead resting on it. And he looked out his door and said, man, that looks like that sucks. I was so ill. I went back to my house. It was on, I think, a Sunday because NFL games were on. I had the lights off the whole time. And I would sit up in my bed, type a sentence, and have to lay back down because I was so nauseous. It ended up being it was the worst thing I've ever filed. It was like 12 paragraphs on Ryan Adams, who was a second baseman, who was a pretty high draft pick. He had never made it past AAA, I don't think. And it was literally 12 graphs. So what do you think is going to happen to Ryan Adams? And I'd lay back down and try not to puke. So that was probably the toughest one. But there are days where it's like I wake up thinking, even tomorrow, I'm going to be thinking, well, until the caravan starts or spring training, unless they do something, and, it's like you got to come up with something. So it is tricky. But somehow it just every off season, I begin thinking I'm not going to be able to get through all these months. And knock on wood, somehow there's something each day that comes up, or I'm able to think of something.
That's very incredible to hear that story. Very, very cool. So, yeah, like I mentioned before, you're with the Orioles. You cover the Orioles for MASN. You're at the ballpark almost every day. So, just me and Dan just walking up to the around the press box. I'm like, hey, I know that guy, and Dan's like, hey,
I believe I pointed him out.
No, but that one Craig Heist. I was like, Craig Heist is right there. Yeah, I know Craig, but you're like, that's Roch. I'm like, is that Roch?
It's like, that's Roch.
Yeah, he gives me visual confirmation. I'm like, hey, that's Roch. Let's see what we can do. And here he is.
Well, my seat moved. That probably helped because I had moved when I went to MASN. I moved to the second row, closer to Heist actually. And then during the pandemic, when the press box was practically empty, they said, hey, do you want to just move down to the front again? And I did. And then when they started having access again, like, do you want to just stay there? And I was like, other than having to be careful about line drive foul balls, yeah, why not? So I actually moved back to the front row. Once I went to MASN, I was in the second row. It might have been harder for you to spot me back then. So see, another break. I just happened to, the pandemic brought us together, guys.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes it's meant to be.
To make a long question short, is there a particular ballpark food that you just cannot go without at Camden Yards?
You know what? I rarely eat the concessions because they have the press dining room, and that's free for me, but also you get reimbursed. But also a lot of times I'm working on like the pregame notes and everything, so I'm eating at my laptop. It's really pathetic. It's the glamorous part of the job. I'm eating a very mediocre meal at my laptop. So I don't really get around there much. But when they did have, during the pandemic where they had closed press dining, you could bring a sandwich or something, or you could go to the concessions. And they actually had a really good taco stand that was right down the ramp from like the home plate area. You hung a right and it was right there. And then I saw, Jimmy's Seafood has got to be awesome, but I think it's way down, and I'm kind of lazy to make that walk if I'm pressed for time. But that's certainly a good one. And you can't go wrong with booze. Fortunately, they serve it sometimes in the press dining room. But if you're willing to make that walk, you never can go wrong with booze.
And the reason why I asked that question is because when me and Dan were at that Orioles game, we decided last minute, let's just go down. Unfortunately, the Pirates did beat Dan's Orioles, but the one highlight The one highlight I will take, actually two, how beautiful Camden Yards is, because
Right.
I've been there for,
One of the best.
that was my first time there. And my second takeaway was the hot dog with crab and macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
The absolute best. I spent a pretty penny, but it tasted pretty darn good.
Yeah. 4 out of 5 doctors say you should not do that, but it's so worth it. Now, let me ask you, how have you not been to Camden Yards?
Well,
he's a dirty Nationals fan. That's all.
Yeah,
Got it.
No, it's not.
He's a
everybody. We're out of time.
No, so I've been thinking about it. Then the pandemic hit, but after I was like, I mean, are we just gonna lock in a trip to Camden? Because I've been wanting to go. I have nothing against the Orioles, and we're gonna get into this next. But I mean, I was like, Dan, let's go. Let's just lock it in, a Sunday 1:35. And we got there, and it was pretty fun. I have to say, a very beautiful ballpark indeed. No complaints. The staff was nice. It's great. I mean, the ushers were nice, everything. So I really enjoyed my first visit.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes we take it for granted because we're there all the time. And then I kind of see it through the eyes of like visiting media that will go ahead and post photos because we're pretty low. I mean, San Francisco's ballpark, I think you're even a little bit closer. But then there's Camden Yards. So you're right on top of the action. And it's just, it's a great backdrop. And, the warehouse, that there was a big debate whether they should tear it down when it was the ballpark was being built. John Stedman, I think, wrote a whole column saying get rid of it. It's an eyesore. And who knew it was going to become this iconic part of the ballpark, and just everything about it. It's beautiful. But I sometimes kind of just do take it for granted. And then I start looking at other ballparks. I'm like, man, we really have it good here. Plus, for our purposes, easy to get in the press lot, a short walk to Home Plate Plaza, the elevator, press bus is easy to get downstairs. So for our work purposes too, it's ideal. You go to Nats Park, no offense, but you're so high up, the game's more of a rumor. Like, I think you're playing down there. I can't tell. You have to park in a garage that they charge you $44, and then you got to write it off. And it's a long walk then, and it's hard to get from there back to the club, down to the clubhouse quickly because you're so many floors up. It just makes me realize the convenience of Camden Yards, along with just how nice it is.
Absolutely. So let's get into some Orioles baseball talk. Unfortunately, not making it to the postseason, but give credit where credit's due. They made some pretty big strides this year, Roch. I haven't followed them as closely as I would have liked because I usually follow both the teams in the DMV, but I'm sure Dan can pick up some more pieces. But I know one name for sure who came up through the minors, Adley Rutschman. He did absolutely fantastic. Just a lot of, I would say the energy is shifting, and this Orioles baseball team is getting better and better and better. And it's just going to take a little bit more time until we see this team back in the postseason.
I agree. And they came much closer than we imagined. I didn't see one projection that had them finishing above 500, let alone they weren't eliminated till like 5 days left in the season. And the bullpen is really where that started. It was so much better than what it had been. Brandon Hyde could rest easy when he picked up that phone. He was getting key outs from guys. And you have to hope there isn't a regression because, sometimes you have guys that kind of peak like that. And then the following year, they take a step back. But they're going to get a full year of Rutschman, a full year of Gunnar Henderson, probably a full year, we assume, of Kyle Stowers, Grayson Rodriguez, D.L. Hall. They're going to have some other guys coming up to go with the Santanders, Mullins, Hayes, Mountcastle, whatever. And so you would think that they're going to continue to trend in that right direction. It's just, is the rotation going to be good enough? Because they didn't go out and get the big number one starter. And they're hoping that turns out to be homegrown, like Grayson Rodriguez, for example. And you hope you get full seasons from Kramer and Bradish and Wells instead of spurts of being really good. So, yes, they have an opportunity to take that next step, even though it's such a hard division. Maybe you're playing for a wild card, but you would take that. But, yeah, it was a big surprise. And really, Rutschman was the key. If you look what the record was when he came up May 21st, and what they were the rest of the way, that's not a coincidence. And they had to make a choice. There were people in the organization that were pushing hard for Bobby Witt Jr. And obviously, there were others that said, no, Rutschman's got to be the guy. You probably couldn't go wrong either way. But Rutschman was just, he's just such a difference maker all around, behind the plate, at the plate. The way he works with the pitchers and his energy. He did bring, there was that youthful energy when these guys were coming up, and you could see that difference. And now we hope that brings more people to the ballpark. It's really fun. I mean, I covered this team full time since '97, and it was electric there. When you have 40-some thousand people at Camden Yards, and we always remember, the postseason and the Delman double, the famous Delman double.
My favorite.
It's never been louder there. And I think they get back to that. It's just between the losing seasons, which you knew were coming, it was going to be ugly, and the pandemic. Baltimore's obviously, its reputation hasn't been great. Some people still worry about, is it safe? And believe me, it's safe to go to the ballpark, but still, Baltimore's, their reputation has taken a real hit. So trying to get tourists coming back, people that plan their vacations. Now people that do that are like Red Sox and Yankee fans, that tickets are cheaper to come to Camden Yards.
Exactly.
But to get more people to come, and they're working on that, the concerts and things like that. But you get those people back to the ballpark, that's a big home field advantage.
So would you say that this core and this farm system in general, is this the most promising group you've covered in your time here? You said full-time since '97. Obviously, back then the Orioles were, annual playoff contenders. They've had a couple spurts, in the last, 10 to 15 years where they've been in the postseason. But, do you see long-term playoff success because of the young core and the farm system and the fact that they have, that Mike Elias has really been responsible for rebuilding that and reshaping that, which is really the foundational thing for, a small market team, the team that's not the Yankees or the Red Sox that can go out and just spend, boatloads of money. So,
right. I mean, I think they certainly can get to the point where they're annual contenders like the Rays are, and the Rays aren't outspending everybody, but the Rays do spend some. And I think with the Orioles, Mike Elias has come through with everything he's promised up to this point, as far as what they've done with the international market, that department, and suddenly becoming involved internationally, which they weren't before, and their analytics department that he built, and the talent pipeline. I've covered this team when they ranked last in the majors or farm system, and now they're number one. I mean, that's a tremendous jump. And he was talking about just keep pumping that talent in. That's what they're doing. The guys they have that made the majors, the guys who are on the verge of it, like Colton Cowser and Connor Norby, for example, Joey Ortiz. And then you go further back from that. Here's Jackson Holiday, and there's going to be other guys and whoever the next round here. And that's what you're looking to do. Plus these international players who are slowly, 16 or whatever, it's going to filter through. But they are going to have to reach a point, and they've said they will do this, where they will start then when it's time to increase payroll and spend more. Now, we got some confusion with liftoff, thinking that didn't just mean now we're at the point where we can contend every year and add to the major league roster, not just get prospects, but also that meant liftoff for the payroll. Those were two different topics, as we later learned when Michael Elias clarified that the payroll is going to go up. They've raised it to 6 guys already through arbitration, or 5, and there's going to be a 6th with Austin Voth, plus guys they have added. But it's a gradual increase. They're not going to suddenly go out and spend $300 million on a player. That's why all the rumors about Polish Rodon, or was there Correa or anybody else like that, where it was never going to happen. They weren't going to spend that much. I think some fans thought liftoff meant, yes, we're going to spend millions and millions on, they're not there yet. And I don't know if they ever will be to that point. I think they get to the point maybe after this off season where they're willing to go after more of some of the first tier guys instead of second and third. So I think if you do that, coupled with the talent they already have coming up through the system and the surplus they have where they could go ahead and make some trades, which they've wanted to do since like Andy McPhail, we used to talk about that. Grow the arms, get the surplus, then trade some like the Astros did when Elias was bringing the top line starters and other teams to it. So these guys can help you on the team, or they can be sent to somebody else. And they may have to rely on that as well. Make sure you trade the right guys, though. But still, I think at some point the payroll, they're going to have to go ahead and spend a little more to fill some spots. But I think they're in a really good position as far as prospects they have now, being able to rely on those in-house guys and to be a better baseball team.
Well, that makes me so excited as a long-suffering, not long-suffering, but, I was born in 97, so I've never really had a chance to see a consistent Orioles team. Had a couple of great
So
moments.
you were born the year that I was full-time covering the Orioles for
97.
the first time. Okay, just put in perspective. The wire-to-wire season, you were born.
That's it. Yeah.
That's awesome. So just to wrap things up here, Roch, I know pitchers and catchers report mid-February. I'm sure you're sort of prepping stuff to cover, get ready to go full steam ahead, writing for however many days during the week you will write, because I know you said you're cutting it back a little bit, but what are you expecting to see out of pitchers and catchers once they report? And just this can be general, because I know this is sort of a loaded question and it's still pretty early, but what are you looking to see out of spring training from the Orioles as well?
Yeah, they report on the 15th. The first workout's the 16th. First full squad, I think, is the 21st. So, you see, make sure everybody showed up, no visa issues, everybody, no unexpected injuries. We know Nick Vespi had hernia surgery. They were nice enough to tell us that, or we would have wondered what was wrong with Nick Vespi. But you're going to look at, John Means, how's he progressing, from his return from Tommy John. And we're going to get to talk to him at this caravan that's coming up. It's going to be another opportunity. And, we're going to get closer looking like a Kyle Gibson. I've never covered him. He was signed to be like a fourth or fifth starter, probably. He may end up being the number one starter opening day if they don't add somebody else. We don't know. It's such a wide open competition. I think that's probably going to be the most interesting component of this camp, is who are the 5 starters and what order are they going to be in. Usually you go to camp and you already know, all right, well, John Means was definitely 1. And last year it was like in Jordan Lyles is 2. How did the last 3 play out? Other years it was always Chris Tillman was the number 1 guy, and let's see how they slot after that. Right. This is a rare occasion when we're going to show up, and if they don't add somebody else to the rotation, and certainly if they don't add a number 1, and you probably have to make a trade to get a true number 1 now, then we're going to be like, how are they going to line these guys up? Maybe going into opening day in Boston is going to determine who has the best camps. It's like a steel cage match. I mean, this is a wide open competition for 5 spots and in what order they're in. So to me, that's the most interesting thing. And then how the bullpen is comprised. Some of it could be which guys who didn't make the rotation end up in long relief, or in relief at all. Is DL Hall one of those guys? It's an Austin Voth, who can be like a swing man. Bruce Zimmerman, Spencer Watkins, whomever. How many of those guys could filter down to a bullpen that's already pretty loaded right now? So I think we already know the catching competition. The backup is McCann. We know Rutschman. There's no drama on the catcher side of pitchers and catchers. But pitching, that's the most interesting thing. It's rotation, bullpen, and then maybe the final bench spot is what we're going to be looking for.
And that is key for a young team. You gotta have arms. You gotta have pitching. So
you never have enough starting pitching. Always remember that. If you have 8 or 9, they're going to say we need 12, because there are always injuries or AAA depth.
And in the going to the bullpen, just briefly, that entrance music from Bautista, that is very, very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. And at first I thought maybe that was putting too much pressure on him, because when there's a light show, the video montage and the music and the Omar whistle, the team in the other dugout is like, we want to jam it right now with these guys. Like, we want to make them pay for this. Like, how dare you? So I thought, man, you're really like poking the bear when you do that. So you better really have a lot of confidence in your guy. I think he handled it really well. And fans really enjoyed it. But you get a light show break it out. It's pretty cool. But it probably tightens the pressure a little bit on Felix, because now you've really incited the other team that probably doesn't appreciate the theatrics, even though you do see it in other ballparks as well. But I think it was a cool idea. They pretty much had just put together that video, and then all of a sudden it went perfectly. They had the whistle, and he had again, one of the things that you were totally unexpected, a guy who averaged like 5+ walks per 9 innings in the minors, reduced them in the majors. It never happens that way. Sanel Perez was another guy. Too many walks in the minors. Usually it's worse in the majors, and he reduced his. It says a lot about the Orioles pitching program that they have. But now you have to hope that there's no regression, and these guys can go ahead and duplicate that. And Brian Baker can be the same guy. I mean, so you're counting on a lot, which is why it was smart to bring Michael Gibbons back, because that's a 60 to 70 appearance strikeout guy who strengthens that bridge to the closer and who can close a little bit himself if he has to.
The School of Roch. You can find him on MASNsports.com. He has a lot of great Orioles covering anything and everything the Baltimore Orioles. You can find him on Twitter at MASNRoch. Roch, I wish we had more time, but I know we have to let you go. But this was a blast, my friend,
awesome.
and it was a great pleasure interviewing you today, my friend. And if we didn't hear from you beforehand, we wish you safe and happy season covering the Baltimore Orioles.
Thanks. We'll hear from you. First of all, we'll do this again sometime. And unless something changes, I get a couple club level tickets to each game. So pick a game, stay in touch. I'll give you my tickets. And you can experience life on the club level. And of course, if the game's dull, you can always go back to the whole bar area and all that. But and you can sample all the new food. So let me know which game you want to go to.
Dude,
get you out of Nats Park there, Josh. We got to get you out of Nats Park.
Yeah, we gotta make sure he goes to the real.
Yeah, you know, I don't have a problem with the Orioles and the Nats too. But before we close things out, I mean, the Nats, they're young. This is their youth. We're seeing their youth. I'm not expecting much, so I'm not sure how much you read down there, Roch, about the Nats, but they're young.
Right. Sure. And they're not spending the money they were before. But you know what? You can ride that World Series a little longer if you're them. It's been since '83 with the Orioles. You can't ride that anymore. You know?
That's right. You're totally right.
MASN Roch right here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. Thanks again, Roch. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy it.